Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
Here we are already in February the 21st, and today we're going to turn our attention to Leviticus chapter 5 and chapter 6 first off. But notice something first. We're going to learn a little bit of the Hebrew while still staying in the English. Look here at verse 6. He shall bring to the Lord as his compensation. Now notice, there's a little footnote there. Go down to the footnote, Hebrew, his guilt penalty, so throughout Leviticus. Now, you just learned Hebrew. The ESV translators just taught us Hebrew without having to ever leave the English. And so this word here, his compensation, literally means his guilt penalty. And then they let us know that they've translated his guilt penalty, as his compensation all throughout the rest of the book. So notice this as well. In verse 9, we have the phrase sin offering, and then look at verse 10. He shall offer a second for a burnt offering, according to the rule, and the priest shall make atonement for him for the sin that he has committed, and he shall be forgiven. So put those terms together: sin offering, atonement, and forgiven. So we learn just from this one passage that forgiveness comes through sacrifice and atonement. And we get that all from the book of Leviticus. See how rich its themes are? In we should say how essential it is for us to understand the King on the cross and our salvation. Notice here in chapter 6, the Lord spoke to Moses, and now the Lord is going to talk about this person who has robbed or oppressed his neighbor. And then once he comes to realize the wrong that he's done, here's the provision that he has to go and make it right with his neighbor. And so, but notice there's not only a horizontal dimension, there's also a vertical dimension. He has to make it right with his neighbor, as well as he has to make it right with his Lord. Look at what happens here in verse 7. And the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven for any of the things that one may do, and thereby become guilty. So horizontal and vertical dimensions, following the pattern of the Ten Commandments. But go back, I missed something. Go back to verse 11 of Leviticus 5. But if he cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, he shall bring his offering for the sin that he has committed, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for his sin. Notice this: if he cannot afford, this is an important point for us to learn. There is provision for forgiveness for everyone, even those who can afford the big items for the forgiveness. And here's what we can learn from that. Walking with the Lord is open to all. Forgiveness is not just for the elite, it's for whosoever. Now, there's also a phrase that I want to point out quickly to you. Verse 11, we see this phrase, outside the camp. That's going to become important, especially as we think about Jesus, especially as we get to the book of Hebrews, but we'll save it for that. And then notice here, verse 13, fire shall be kept burning on the altar continually, it shall not go out. That way our sins are perpetually forgiven. But let's turn over to Mark chapter 1. Let's look at our New Testament reading today. They were astonished, verse 22, at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority, not as one of the scribes. And then look at verse 27. What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even unclean spirits, and they obey him. And at once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding regions of Galilee. Now look at verse 34. Jesus would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. And then they have this, his fame is spreading. Peter comes and says, everyone is looking for you. He's praying. Jesus is praying. He's at a desolate place. I love verse 35. Rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said, everyone is looking for you. And he said, let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also. That is why I came out. Jesus came to preach, as well as, and when he went to the synagogues, he preached and he cast out demons. So his fame is is spreading. Look at verse 45. He went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town. But he was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him from every quarter. But what was his emphasis? Preaching and casting out demons. Now finally, let's go down here to Psalm 48 and look at verse 9. We have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your people. As your name, O God, so your praise reaches, look at this, to the ends of the earth. Jesus' fame while he was on the earth is a foretaste of his fame that's one day going to be spread to the end of the earth. Now look at verse 12. Walk about Zion, go around her, number her towers, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. Now, look at that. That's another footnote. Let's go down to the footnote. In the Septuagint, another reading is, compare that with Jerome in the Syriac. Look at this. He will guide us beyond death. How long is the Lord going to guide us? He's going to guide us forever, even beyond death.